A portion of this video is brought to you by Surfshark VPN. Today we're looking at the M2 MacBook Air, featuring a new design, new display, as well as that powerful M2 chip. I've been using the M2 Air as my main computer for productivity, some gaming, as well as video and photo editing. And there's a lot to like with this new machine. But there are a few things that you should think about carefully and choose wisely if you're considering this computer. All of which we'll get into today. As always, I will leave all the purchase links down in the description. Let's get started. Alright, so first let me tell you about my spec and why I chose it. So I opted to go for the base model, which comes in at $1,199, making it $200 more expensive compared to the previous M1 MacBook Air. Now for $1,199, you get an 8-core CPU, 8-core GPU, 256 gigabytes of storage, as well as 8 gigabytes of RAM. Now, after using the computer for a good week or two, is there any spec that I would upgrade or choose differently if I were to buy this computer again? Well, just one, and that would be the storage. I would definitely upgrade to the 512 gigabyte SSD, as 256 gigabytes is just not enough. And then when it came to the color, for me, the choice was easy. You guys know I love the midnight color on my Apple Watch, as well as my iPhone 13. So when Apple finally brought this to the Mac, you know I had to go for it. I really love how in the dark, the color looks almost black. But then when I angle it sort of towards the light, you can see those dark blue undertones come out. And in my opinion, just looks super sleek, understated, and clean. However, if you are concerned with fingerprints, do not get this color, as you can see here on the back, just from holding the computer the past minutes, it is full of fingerprints. Even here on the top, it is starting to show. So if that is something that does bother you, maybe think twice about this color and instead go for the Starlight, which is this sort of silver/gold color, or just go for the classic silver. But let me know in the comments, which color would be your favorite of the new M2 MacBook Air? By the way, if you are enjoying this video so far, a sub to the channel would be fantastic. Basically, this is what I've been doing between every shot of this video so far. Good old wipe down with the cloth. The M2 MacBook Air features an all-new and complete redesign. Gone is that tapered edge that we saw on basically all previous MacBook Airs, and we now get that consistent thickness, more boxy design that looks much more like the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros. And if you guys have seen my review of that model, you will know that I love this design. It feels incredibly sturdy and looks really modern and sharp. I also like the slightly bigger Apple logo on the back, and in the hand, the computer still feels super light, coming in at just 2.7 pounds, yet it is still very sturdy, and you get no bending or any kind of flexing whatsoever. Looking around the new M2 Air, you can see that on the left side, we now have the return of MagSafe, and it also comes with this really nice braided and color matched cable. Not to mention, having MagSafe of course means the charger will connect magnetically, so if ever your dog or your kid or someone trips on the cable, it will just unplug without pulling the entire computer off the table. And then next to that, we have two USB-C Thunderbolt ports. This is great, especially because now your MagSafe will be used for charging, so you don't have to use one of these ports just for your power. Though I would have preferred it if Apple put one port on each side, it is still good to have two. And then on the other side, all we have is the headphone jack, which these days feels like a feature, so I have to mention it. And then on the inside, we have a great keyboard. This is a scissor switch mechanism, which is incredibly comfortable to type on, giving enough travel and nice tactile feedback. And the keys are also quite balanced. And most importantly, this keyboard, unlike the previous butterfly keyboard, is really reliable. I especially like having Touch ID in the top left corner, making it easy to instantly log in, authorize payments, or access your stored passwords. And beneath the keyboard, we have the trackpad. Now, Apple does trackpads like no other, and the trackpad here is no exception. It is big, it is great to use. The nice, soft, smooth glass surface is just a joy to work on. On the top, the MacBook Air features an upgraded 1080p webcam. Now, you guys can let me know what you think of the quality. I think it is certainly nothing special, but gets the job done. However, I do think that the audio quality on the built-in microphones is surprisingly good. The speakers, in classic Apple fashion, are also surprisingly good. Now, this design is particularly impressive since we don't actually have any open or visible speaker grills on the computer. Instead, the sound comes from the hinge sitting right between the top case and the display. And I was really surprised by not just how loud the speakers are, but also how detailed they are, and they definitely get some bass, though not as much as the larger 14 or 16-inch MacBook Pros. And the last thing I really like about the design of the M2 MacBook Air is the fact that it doesn't have a fan. Now, this means that there are no moving parts inside, which is of course great for durability, and also means that it will operate entirely silently. Now, later in the video, I will be going over the performance to see how much or how little of an impact this fanless design will have on this machine's performance. But first, let's talk about this all-new display. Now, compared to the previous MacBook Air, this display is actually slightly larger, going from 13.3 inches now up to 13.6. And while this difference may sound small, it does make quite a big difference. I find it to be just a little more spacious, and I really like the rounded corners on the top of the display, as well as the thinner bezels going all the way around. This allows for a larger display in a smaller body computer. Unlike the previous MacBook Air, the M2 Air's display does get brighter, going from 400 nits now up to 500, and this is a difference that I noticed immediately, making it easier to use the computer if you have, say, reflections from windows, or even able to use it outdoors. Colors on this display also look really great, being vibrant yet still accurate enough to comfortably edit video as well as photo. The display is also sharp enough to easily read even finer details and text. Before I was able to test the performance of the M2 Air, I had to install all of my apps, and the first app I install is Surfshark VPN. I consider this to be essential, not just at home, but especially when traveling, as these days more than ever, everything we do is done online. From browsing the web, streaming TV shows, to staying in touch with family and friends, and even banking. We'd like to think our information is safe, but as our digital presence grows, so does the need for proper security. And this is where Surfshark VPN comes in, a service that protects your information and privacy by encrypting all data that you send through the internet, keeping anyone unwanted from seeing it. Another great reason to use a VPN is because sometimes streaming services will restrict or block content depending on which location you're in. With Surfshark, you can easily solve that problem by changing your location. Choose from over 3,200 servers in 95 countries. For example, I love to watch the classic Pokemon series on the Japanese Netflix. Not only is this good for streaming, but can be crucial for those in countries with heavily censored internet. Surfshark VPN supports all major platforms, and I find the app to be super easy to use. By using my link in the description and code Dion, you will get 83% off your plan. Plus, you get 3 months for free. Surfshark also offers a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you try it and don't like it, simply cancel, get your money back, and buy a cheap cup of coffee instead. Anyway, thank you so much to Surfshark for supporting the channel. Now back to the Mac. And now let's talk about the performance. Now, as I mentioned, I got the base model, so how did it keep up? Well, during typical day-to-day tasks, it absolutely flies. I will, normally speaking, have around 10 to 12 apps open at all times, and it can easily run this with no lags or stutters or any kind of slowdowns. And to my surprise, the 8GB of RAM was actually just fine. Now, I'm sure that 16GB will run even better, but again, I suggest upgrading the 512GB SSD instead, as the 256GB model will give just about 1500 megabytes of read and write speeds, where the 512GB model should give double that at around 3000. And this means reading data and transferring data on your hard drive will be significantly faster on that upgraded model. As a content creator, I use Final Cut Pro every day, and running Final Cut Pro in a 4K timeline on the M2 MacBook Air has been great. It keeps up well. I'm able to quickly scroll in the timeline, add and remove layers without any lag or stutter. In fact, exporting a 10-minute 4K project took just about 6 minutes, which isn't much longer compared to my M1 Pro MacBook Pro. But this gap does widen when you have multiple apps running in the background. You can see that in this case, the M1 Pro MacBook Pro does further outperform the M2 Air, and especially when it comes to any rendering or upscaling, where it is around 4 times faster. And this is largely due to the fact that not only the M1 Pro is still a more powerful processor than the M2, it also has a fan and is therefore able to cool itself and keep up that higher sustained performance for longer, whereas the M2 MacBook Air without its fan needs to limit the performance in order to cool itself down. The M2 MacBook Air won't replace my M1 MacBook Pro, but it definitely got closer in terms of performance than I thought, and is really more than capable of running those creative apps. But it does get hot. Now, not uncomfortably so, but if you are editing and have the laptop on your lap, you are gonna feel it. This may be nice in the winter, but less in the summer. In my unboxing video, some of you asked about how it would run Minecraft, and I love Minecraft, so I loaded up my main world, which is a pretty big world, and let's see how it performs. So running on fancy graphics and the render distance set to 23, which I would say is above average, I found myself getting anywhere from around 28 to 42 frames per second. Now, if I turn the render distance down to say around 18 or 16, I more easily get a sustained 40 to the proper 60 FPS. All of this is to say that the M2 MacBook Air is more than capable of running Minecraft. So with all of this performance, what has the battery life been like? Well, the M2 chip is not just powerful, but also power efficient. Apple advertises around 18 hours of mixed use, and in the real world, I found myself easily getting through a full day with around 30% remaining, and I can easily stretch this to 2 days with lighter productivity use. When editing in Final Cut Pro, I would say I can get around 6 hours of editing, which is more than my M1 Pro MacBook Pro. So all in all, I would say the battery life on the M2 Air is really fantastic, and again, having MagSafe is just so nice as well. In the box, we get a 30-watt charger included, which not only is really small, it is also nice and lightweight. You also do have the option to upgrade to a faster charger, which will charge at 65 watts, or as well as a dual port charger, which will allow you to charge 2 devices. So for example, your MacBook alongside your iPhone. Okay, so who is this M2 MacBook Air really for? Well, this to me is the ultimate portable, lightweight, yet still powerful machine, being able to easily run all the same apps as my M1 MacBook Pro, albeit not as fast. That said, if you are a creative professional and use those heavy creative apps every day, I would still suggest jumping up to the M1 MacBook Pro for its better sustained performance, better 120Hz display, as well as the wider selection of ports. Also, I would not suggest getting the M2 MacBook Pro. While it may be similarly priced to the M2 MacBook Air, the M2 MacBook Air features a more modern, better design and display, and almost identical performance. I would say the M2 MacBook Air is ideal for students, creatives, or those who travel often and want a sleek, portable, yet powerful computer to take with them on the go. This really is the best all-around Mac that Apple currently offers that will last for a good 4 to 5 years to come. Just make sure that you upgrade to that 512GB SSD and think twice about this beautiful but smudgy midnight color. Alright guys, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions, and if you haven't seen them yet, I highly recommend watching my M2 MacBook Air unboxing video, as well as my M1 Pro MacBook Pro long-term review. I have a comparison video coming very soon. Thanks again for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.